Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Serious topic, let's do it. What's the scariest thing that's ever happened to you in a well lit and populated area? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I was working a construction job a while back, and I was told to wait on the ground for someone. I bent down to retie my boots, and a pallet full of mixing cement comes crashing down where I was just standing. I clearly remember the foreman saying I would have been stone cold dead if my shoes were tied. Broad daylight, nobody reported the accident. OSHA was different back then. If anyone has seen the movie Grand Canyon, you'll know how I felt. I was maybe 10 or maybe 12 years old. My mom took me to the mall so she could go to the Target. There was a baseball card comic book store right next to the Target, and while she shopped, I got to go look at the collectibles. While I was looking at the cards in the case, a guy came in. He looked around for a minute, then approached me and asked if I liked baseball cards. I said that I did, and he said he had a Babe Ruth card in his van and asked if I would like to see it. We were right at the counter, and the clerk was right there, but I got a real creepy vibe from this guy. I said no, and left the store to go back to Target and find my mom. I looked behind me as I walked into Target, and sure enough, he was following me. I was starting to get a little scared, so I turned into the women's underwear aisle, thinking he wouldn't follow me. He kept after me until I finally found my mom. I never told her about it because I didn't want to scare her. At the time, I thought maybe he wanted to steal my $10, but now I'm pretty sure he wanted more than $10. TL, DR, Creepster tried to get me in the mall. When I was really young, a guy stopped me when I was leaving school and asked if I liked PlayStation and Nintendo. I told him I did, and that I really liked the Final Fantasy, and he said, "What a coincidence. I have that with the TV in my van. Want to come play?" I told him I had to ask my mom first and to stay here. I ran home and called my mom to ask, and she told me to lock the door, get in the basement, and don't open the door for anyone. She explained what was happening to me when she got home, and once I knew, I was pretty freaked out. A few years ago, I was at a bowling center on a busy day. When we were about to leave, we heard a big bang. A man had thrown the heaviest bowling ball on a woman's head. Later I read that he did it on purpose, and the woman had severe brain damage and was lucky to be alive. The man got sentenced to 18 months in prison. An addict wanted money from me downtown, but I literally had nothing but my clothes on, so I said, "Sorry man, all out." Dude lumbers towards me slowly, pushes me over, and stabs me in the thigh with a Swiss Army knife. I booked it to the hospital for stitches. Didn't hurt until I actually looked at it. Adrenaline didn't stop pumping for a very long time. Many years ago, I was just about to walk into the restaurant where I was the assistant manager, where I was approached by this huge guy who was all smiles and generally gave across this body language of being friendly. Is a "sorry, but I need to ask you something" kind of way. Next thing I knew, he was screaming at me about some friends I hadn't seen in a while. Turns out my friend had stolen some weed off this dodgy guy, and my name had come up for some reason. Right there in the middle of a busy road in a busy city, he pulled out a Stanley knife and told me he was going to cut my throat with it if I didn't give him his 350 pounds right there. I still don't remember exactly what I said to him, but he left, told me he was going to kill me if he ever saw me again, and I went into work. When I was 12 years old, I was beaten up at a crowded bus station at rush hour by a boy several years older than me for absolutely no reason whatsoever. It was a completely unprovoked attack, and I was trapped against a one-way door. The adults standing around waiting for their buses to go home from work did absolutely nothing to help me or to stop me from being attacked. I accompanied my dad to the hospital while he was undergoing a routine procedure. They put him under for an hour to do a laryngoscopy. I kicked back in the cheery, well-lit lobby with my tablet playing a game. I was engrossed in the game, but about 10 minutes later, I realized the place had gone eerily silent. I looked up and there were no nurses or staff anywhere. I was the only person in what had been a room with half a dozen people going back and forth. Looking around, I suddenly noticed a red light flashing over one of the doors. My heart dropped out of my chest. My hands went icy and numb. I started counting the doors. The red light was flashing over my dad's door. I walked slowly down the hallway, trying not to make a sound. I didn't want to disturb anyone. I didn't want to miss any sounds. I didn't want to know what was happening in the room I was walking toward. I felt like a scared 7-year-old. A nurse came out, and he grabbed me on the shoulder. "Hey," he said casually, "we're working with your dad right now, but I need to have you wait in the lobby right now, okay?" "Okay, what's going on?" My voice was small and timid and high, and I hated hearing it, hated feeling helpless. "Oh, we'll be out to talk to you in just a second. Sorry, but I gotta go." He slipped back into the room, and the unearthly silence came back. So I walked back to the lobby and sat down. A chaplain came by a bit later as I was sitting motionless. My dad had had a heart attack while under. He went into a coma, but they got his heart beating again. As I went in to see him, nurses and doctors filtered out of the room. Blood spatters on the sheets and floor. My dad, quiet, wired into half a dozen machines. About 15 minutes later, when my mom arrived to answer my urgent texts and calls, the lobby had a couple of families in there chatting happily, and the staff was back to its business. We pulled his life support 4 days later, after learning he was irrevocably brain dead. The world can change so fast. Your life can get turned upside down. Your life can end. And for the people around you, it can just be another day. They go on without ever noticing the pain inside of you. That was the moment in my life this truth was most starkly plain. Nothing has ever been more terrifying. Yeah, there's a lot of logic behind what you say. I mean, you could be having the worst day of your life, and a couple right next to you could be getting married. So it's a matter of perspective, but then you have the choice to make that. Are you going to live in fear or live in gratitude? I guess, somewhere in the middle. Fistula rupture of a patient in my hospital. Blood everywhere. Blood on the floor, ceiling, workers, and everywhere else you can imagine. Splurging everywhere. Doctors and nurses worked on her for 45 minutes, but nothing they could do to save her. It looked like something had been slashed open with a sword in the room, and the worst part is that her 3 kids were there to see it. It was well lit and populated as it was my workplace. I was a pourer in a foundry at the time. Due to a mistake in the metal, it had to be put back into the furnace instead of being poured, a job that is done by using a crane to take the ladle, big bucket full of molten metal, back to the furnace. The ladle is then manually rolled over and the metal poured back into the furnace. I was the lucky guy to roll it in, and whilst rolling it in, the crane driver made the mistake and moved the ladle out of position. This resulted in a wave of 1600 degrees Celsius, 3000 Fahrenheit metal flying toward me like water off a spoon in the sink. Due to the light coming from the molten metal, I couldn't gauge the depth of the wave at the time, but looked down to see nothing but orange light surrounding me from waist up. This lasted a moment at most, but in that moment, every possible injury that could come from that crossed my mind. No injury came of that, like a spoon in the sink. The wave was very thin, and my gear was good enough, but I was genuinely terrified then. I'm not sure if it was the most terrifying thing that happened to me, but it was the most terrifying thing that happened to me at that point in my life. I was about 11 in Cape Town, South Africa, visiting family. My parents were walking in front of me, and I was walking with my little cousin directly behind them. We were in a shopping mall, Tiger Valley Center for any South Africans out there. Anyway, I think my parents had stopped to get some money out of an ATM, and my cousins were just being silly, as you do at that age. This guy, maybe in his mid-20s, sat across from us on a bench, pointed at us, then my parents, and then dragged his finger along his neck. He then pulled open his jacket and pulled a gun out of a pocket. I don't know if that was a real gun, and I didn't care to find out. I told my parents immediately, and we kind of circulated the security personnel before eventually leaving. It was a bit of an uncomfortable situation. Was taking my kids for a walk in the park near our apartment once when a guy and a woman came out of the tree line suddenly, and the guy said to give him my wallet and anything else in my pockets. He had some weird screwdriver knife thing, and I pushed my daughter, my eldest child, behind me. I was going to do the same for my son, but the woman grabbed his other arm, and for some reason my heart felt like it was going to explode for some reason. I suddenly forgot about self-preservation and jumped forwards and broke the woman's nose. I felt a sharp pain under my ribs and looked to see that the man had just shanked me. But at this point, 2 other guys who had been jogging were running up and shouting. The police that patrolled the park showed up not long after that. I was sitting and trying not to bleed to death. The man had ran off and his screwdriver was still in me. The woman was on the ground crying and shouting because I had also knocked out her top two front teeth loose, or out. The two joggers were originally asking the woman if I was the assaulter, but the situation cleared up soon. I got taken to the hospital and questioned about the incident. There was a while when it looked like I was going to be charged with battery for the woman, since it turns out she actually had a decently well-off family, was just an addict. They tried to sue me, but it was thrown out, and she was sentenced for attempted kidnapping. I had a tube in my chest for 2 weeks after my surgery to remove the shank, but it all cleared up after that. Just glad my kids are safe. I was 18 or 19 and picking up a prescription at the pharmacy. While I was waiting in line, a man, who I guess was waiting in line as well, started taking pictures of my feet with a cell phone. He wasn't even trying to be subtle, just kind of bent over and aimed his phone at my feet. I moved a few feet away, and he just followed me. The pharmacist saw the whole thing and mouthed, "Do you know him?" I shook my head with my eyes wide, grabbed my prescription, and bolted away from the counter. I hid in the store until I saw him leave and drive off because I was afraid he might follow me. Maybe not terrifying, but definitely unnerving and creepy. Still creeps me out thinking about it. It wasn't me, but when I was still a college student, I witnessed firsthand the bystander effect. A friend and I had just ridden our waveboards like nerds from the engineering dorm down into the public square, Red Square at UW. We rode down nonstop from McCarty Hall, and were sitting on the library steps watching the sunset. Across the way near the smokestacks, we saw a couple yelling at one another really exaggeratedly. The guy then grabbed the girl and started hauling her about. We were amused as we thought they were play fighting. There was a large group of students sitting right next to them watching and doing nothing either. Nothing seemed wrong until he threw her to the ground and started dragging her toward the stairwell leading to the parking garage. During this time, a group of 5 girls left the garage and walked past. The girl, still being forcibly dragged, pleaded to them, "Please help me." We could hear her clearly from across the square. The girls looked and did nothing and kept walking. Nobody on the stairs moved either. They just watched. My friend and I got up and started walking quickly towards them, but they disappeared into the stairwell before we got halfway across. There, we intercepted the girls who had passed them. "Did you see that?" they were asking amongst themselves worriedly. I glared at them for not stopping. I sent my friend into Odegaard Library to have the help desk call the campus police. While he did that, I went into the stairwell and headed down the steps, all the while hearing the girl screaming, while the guy kept hitting her and shouting at her. I got to the bottom platform, passing 2 people on their way up. One was joking about how it looked like that guy was going to kill his girlfriend. They were amused and unconcerned and ignored me. The bottom platform has double swinging doors that lead to a smaller room with an elevator, and then more doors leading directly into the garage. The guy and girl were in this room, and I was in the stairwell just outside. I waited there for campus police while the guy kept yelling and the girl kept crying. After about 30 seconds, he hit her again, and hefted my waveboard, kicked the door open and shouted rather lamely, "Stop it or I'll hit you." The girl took this opportunity to break free and run up the stairs. The guy, taller and more muscular than me, looked surprised as well, but didn't move. He saw my club-like board and gave up immediately. He tried to explain that his girlfriend was threatening to have him deported. He was in the US illegally past his visa or something, and he was trying to blackmail him or something of the sort. I held him there for a few minutes waiting for campus police, but they still didn't show up. I finally told him to get on the elevator and to stay away from the girl, and that I'd beat the shit out of him if I saw him doing that again. He scrammed, went outside, and saw my friend waiting at the front desk. The library wasn't willing to call the campus police, and when he finally relented and called, they said they would send a unit out. We waited about an hour. Nobody showed up. My dog and I are stopped at a crosswalk, and he barks and scares this woman. As soon as he barked, the walk dude come up across, but the lady started yelling about my needing to control my dog, and she pulled out a taser. I'm just trying to get across the street, and she starts making even a bigger scene, saying how she's going to shock me. My dog is barking at the crazy lady. We are standing in the street now, at a busy intersection, and I thought to myself, I'm about to get tased in front of all these people. As a young teenager in the early 90s, I went to a slightly low-rent amusement park on a school trip. They had some rides, nothing like huge ones at premium parks, but there was a reasonable-looking roller coaster with a full loop and a corkscrew-style part. I'm sure there's a bunch of terminology I don't know about rides, so don't mind me. My group of friends all decided to give it a try. I'd never been on one, so while I was a bit scared, it looked pretty cool, so why not? Our group all get on the same time, talking and bullshitting each other in the way excited kids do. The cars start moving backwards up a slope. Once it gets to near the top, the cars would release and go down the track. We're still moving up the slope, and I look across at my friend and his restraint is down. Mine isn't. Oh shit. I panic, naturally. We must be over 100 feet up on a 45-degree slope. There's nothing I can do to get off, and it can't be too long until the cars will drop. I grab my restraint and pull it down across my chest. I think it locks into place, but now the cars drop. I can't do an effing thing except hold on. The speed pins me into my seat, and while I don't think I'd come out of the corkscrew part, here comes the loop. As I pass the top of the loop, I feel the car slow just a little. My knuckles must have been transparent. They were gripping the edge of my seat so hard in a vain attempt to hold my upside-down ass in the seat. We exit the loop and go up another slope to then reverse the track direction. As it slows, I can just about pry my hands from the seat to check my restraint, and it felt secure. Naturally, I didn't quite trust it, and I gripped my seat all the way back through the course. I got off the ride in a daze and never said a thing about it. Looking back, I didn't know shit about roller coasters. I think I assumed restraints would come down and lock in automatically. There was a ride operator, a bored, tired kid, not much older than I was, who probably should have walked down the cars before they left to check stupid kids like me were locked in and just missed me. A couple of years ago, I was jogging in the center of my town as usual when I realized I was being followed by some guy I'd never seen. He kept trying to talk to me, and at some point he grabbed me from behind and went full molester on me. I shook free and then started screaming, knocking on the hood of a car passing by. He ran away, never to be found. I couldn't jog for over a year. Walking back from lunch to my office, I work in an urban area, but it usually is safe to walk. From the corner of my eye, I thought I saw someone following me. Didn't think too much about it, but picked up my pace a little. I had to stop at a crosswalk, and the person behind me catches up, and I feel something on the back, and he tells me to make a left turn. I turn into the next street, and he asks me for all the money in my wallet. I gave it to him, and he bolted past me. It had to be no later than 1 p.m., and I got mugged right in broad daylight. I'm a 20-something lady. I was heading home from the gym, tired, dressed elegantly, on my way from work, along a large, well-lit street. About a block from my house, a man tried to catch my attention and then to grab me and pull toward the bushes on one side of the sidewalk, having already partly removed his pants. I screamed bloody murder and ran home. After calling the police and describing the attacker, they asked what I was wearing. I was going to get mad, but it turned out he matched the description of a local pedophile suspect that preys on young girls from the nearby school. I was wearing a rather girly navy blue skirt with a white shirt that day. Almost drowned as a 6-year-old in a populated adult pool. I was floundering for what felt like a minute, quickly losing breath and swallowing water. No one around me heard my gargled cries. No one helped. Thank God my mother pulled me out before it was too late. And that's how I developed my fear of water. 16. Female fresh out from school for the day. Take bus home and am standing next to a kid who felt like wearing all red. Car pulls up and a guy in the backseat has a handgun. Points at the kid in red, but I knew more or less everyone at the bus stop was going to get shot because some dumbass wanted to wear gang-affiliated colors. Light turns green and the driver goes, and I'm left reeling with the whole what-if scenario for a few days. I was a senior in high school and was dropping my girlfriend off at her house. She lived in a pretty ghetto area, and I was from the nice part of town. As I was saying bye to her, her neighbor from across the street walked over to us and started yelling at me. This guy was our age, and I guess she knew him as well. He started yelling at me for some reason, so I started walking towards him to do who knows what, when he said, "I have a gun, and I'm gonna kill you." At this, I just stop in my tracks, trying to determine if he's being serious. And then my girlfriend stalks past me, walks up to him, and slaps him in the face as hard as she can and yells, "Get the out of here, Junior, and go home." I stood there thinking, holy shit, she just owned that guy. That was 15 years ago, and we're now expecting our third kid.